Hello and welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I have a fantastic guest here this week. I was not familiar with this gentleman until recently, and his name is Dean Ray. He is a musician that lives in Australia, and when I heard his new album, when I first heard like the first few notes of the first song, I was like, oh, okay, it's singer-songwriter kind of stuff, and that isn't a genre that I typically go after. A song here and there is always nice, but it's just not the style of music that typically draws me in to go, oh, wow, I want to hear what this is all about. But let me tell you, I listened to every song on this album with great interest because it's fantastic. There isn't a single song on here that I'm like, I mean, every one of them is something that really, for lack of a better term, struck a chord with me. And so I'm really excited to have an opportunity to speak with him about this album and what he's got going on and his plans for the next thing and all that good stuff. And we're going to get to him in just a minute. Very grateful to find a new artist that I can just, dig into their work right off the bat and enjoy every little thing that I hear. So that was a great thing. And then what else is going on? So my new show, Uriah Heep, The Magician's Podcast, will start airing on November 3rd. And I'll be launching multiple episodes that day. But to create the RSS feed to link to all of the things that I need to link to, I have to release an episode to be able to release the episodes. It's kind of a weird thing, but I get it. Releasing this unlocks that code, and then I can set up everything else so that come November 3rd, when I release the podcast, everything will go to all of the places that the show will release, including the embeddable player that I will have on my website. So I was going to do the introduction and then a few episodes on November 3rd, but I have to do the introduction ahead of time. So that should be, by the time this episode airs, that should be available. If you go to my website, scotthaskin.com, and click on the link at the top under Uriah Heep Podcast, you will be taken to the podcast page. It won't be fully set up just yet because all the feeds may not have come in yet, but the links to all the social media stuff, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all those things will be there. The show will not air on YouTube, but it will air on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those good places. And the host that hosts the show is Podbean. They will have it on their site as well as it will be able to stream on my website. So that's a really cool thing I'm excited on. It's going to be a long journey, and it's every single album track and bonus track that they recorded in the studio. Unless I'm not aware of a bonus track or can't find it, then I can't do a review of it. But it's going to be very, very interesting. And I'm so grateful to have the support of Mickbox. And I wouldn't be doing the show if I didn't have that. When I interviewed him on this show last month, we talked about it after the interview. I posed the question to him and he was excited about it and said, yeah, let's do it. So very grateful to him for that and excited to bring you the Uriah Heep music, one song at a time, 1 week at a time for the next however many years it takes to get all those songs reviewed. So far, it's looking to be about 6, and that includes the album that they're going into the studio in February to record, but who knows how many more albums they're going to record after that. But if they record it, I'm going to review it, and we're just going to keep going. So that is it with that. The album that I'm working on, the follow-up to the album Entranced, which I am brilliantly calling Entranced 2, because I couldn't think of a better title. No, actually, that just works for me. That is slowly happening. Of course, I've been very distracted from that with setting up the new podcast and keeping this show going. But I've already got a couple songs written. I'm working on the third one now. So that will happen at some point. Once I've got the podcast set up and the first few episodes up and running, then I'll have more time to work on the album. So I don't know if that will happen by the end of this year, but I'm hoping that it will. But I've got a couple of singles that I'm going to release for Halloween. I'm going to have those done and hopefully uploaded this week. So that's coming. And of course, the links will be on the homepage of my website at scotthaskin.com. So that's pretty much everything that's happening in my world. Now let's find out what is going on in the world of Dean Ray. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have a special guest coming to you all the way from Australia, where it is early in the morning for him, and I appreciate him getting up and taking some time to chat with us today about his new album, 4-Track Sessions Volume 1, and it is very good. So let's dig in. Welcome, Dean Ray. Dean, how are you?
Hey, man. How you going?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm adjusting to the new world, but yeah, going okay.
And I wonder how long before it evolves into whatever the next thing might be that we have to adapt to.
Yeah, who knows? Not long, I don't imagine.
Yeah. Well, the good thing, though, about guys like us is that we can still do a lot of the things that we just love doing. And that really helps sustain us through this time. Can't really perform too well right now, but certainly you can write, and you've written a brilliant album. How long?
Thanks, man. Thank you.
How long was this in the works for you?
Well, not intentionally. It's been in the pipeline for 10 years or so. Some of the songs on the album I wrote, a decade ago, and have reworked them recently. But as far as it being proposed as putting an album together, it was sort of an afterthought. I'd released a bunch of acoustic style songs with this 4-track sessions vibe, and then my team suggested that we, solidify it into an album. And so I think I sort of got it all together in about 2 or 3 months.
That's pretty good.
Something like that.
I will say it's interesting that some of the songs were written so long ago, because listening to the album, it really, and obviously, you worked on modernizing them, but you really couldn't tell a difference in, say, maturing and writing over a decade. It really all sounds fresh and modern right now. So whatever you restructured, you really put it into place.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I put a lot of work into rebuilding them. The structures of the songs have remained the same, melodically and stuff like that for the most part. But lyrically, I went back and did a big overhaul and just got rid of things that, so I'm late 20s now, so a late teens guy, like you could tell that it was written by a 17 or 18-year-old. So I wanted to just get rid of all those immature lines that were a bit shallow because I didn't know what I was talking about, whereas now I'm well versed on what's happening in life compared to them.
Sure.
So I just kind of went with a modern, added maturity to it as best that I could.
Well, I think it comes through great. And I'm going through this ongoing project of taking albums that I did like a soft release for and modernizing the songs and looking back on some of them going, what was I thinking? And some of it is really easy to edit yourself, but some things I found a little bit challenging, more on the music side than the lyrical side, because lyrics are pretty easy. You go, okay, that just sounds bad, I'm going to change it. But did you find it hard to really be the producer and get yourself away from the emotional connection to the song?
I think I took a more relaxed approach with it, to be honest, man. I just would spend late nights smoking, drinking, and playing music in the studio and recorded it, So I guess once I'd ticked that off and said, that's done, I've the writing process is done, then I'd just start enjoying it, and playing around with the production of it. And there wasn't too much involved in the production of it because they're story songs, 4 tracks, so just 4 microphones, and kept it really very raw, but there's a lot of practicing involved. So I set myself a bunch of rules. So no auto-tune on vocals, no fixing little things like that. And I was only allowed to do 2 takes, start to finish. So instead of, I've just noticed in studios, people will go verse, do a verse at a time and do the choruses and stuff like that. But I wanted to do it old school, where you've kind of got to go from the start to the finish. So I did that twice and then picked the best parts from that.
I like that.
Yeah, it just gives I think the delivery comes across better because you've practiced the song more instead of just laying down the best that you can do at the time. It's like, no, give it a week before you record the vocals and practice it, for maybe 10, 15 hours over that week period, and then record it. And it usually comes out a lot better, I feel. But I mean, I kept blemishes in there, you know, like there's little parts of the vocals where they're not perfect, but they were perfect for how I was feeling at the time. You know, they came out that way for a reason, so I kept them like that.
Human. And I think we can identify more with things that are human.
Well, that's right.
I'm not a big fan of having everything be perfect.
That's it, man. I can't stand it. I turn on top 40 radio stations now, the mainstream stations, and it's like listening to a robot because they've tuned, even vocalists that don't need to be tuned, they tune them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why? Would you say they sound like a robot? You're getting rid of all the soulful notes and the soulful delivery. You're getting rid of all that so that the advertisers are happy.
Well, yeah, and you can have something that's technically perfect, but as a listener, can you connect with it? And this kind of music,
that's right.
It really needs, you really have to be able to connect with the song.
Yeah, there's got to be blue notes in this stuff. You know, I tried out the pop world about probably 6-7 years ago now, and I dabbled around in the pop realm, but it just wasn't for me because of that. There are many factors, but that was the main thing for me. Was there was no I wasn't personally connecting with the songs that I was singing. And when I listened to the recordings, I was like, you know, that's fat. That sounds really, really full. That sounds dope. But it doesn't have the blue notes. It doesn't have the soul. And what's the point of music if there's no soul? You know, that seems for me the main purpose of music is to affect our emotions and stuff like that on a deeper level. And if it's not, then what is it?
Right. And songs like this are really all about the journey. Whatever the story is, it's taking us on that journey with you. And if I don't feel emotionally connected to the song, not only do I not really care about the journey, I don't care what happens when you get there either. So have to have those elements.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, totally. I mean, there's plenty of songs out there that aren't story songs. And I think a lot of the mainstream music we're hearing now aren't necessarily story songs at all. Some of them pop through that have good stories, but most of them don't seem to have much of a story per se. But this sort of stuff, you know, with these sorts of songs, there's only really one way to do it, and that's just to be raw and honest with it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You've got the right idea, and it certainly shines through on these tracks. I was really, this isn't a style of music that I typically would have as like a go-to. But when I listened to the album, I thought, man, every single one of these tracks, there's nothing that I felt was filler or something that you're like, well, I need one more song, so I'll just throw this one on there. I mean, every track has a good spot on that album.
Thanks, man. Well, it's a global market now. You know, I think people are starting to wake up to that as far as artists. You know, yeah, I'm in Sydney, Australia, but when I release music, it has to compete with what's happening internationally in the Western world. Otherwise, I don't gain any chart action here because, well, it's hard for me to get airplay in Australia because you have to chart on Spotify to get the airplay, and the people charting on Spotify are usually signed with big labels in LA and London, New York, Nashville, stuff like that. So it's tricky. Everyone is competing in a global market now. So I think if you just rush out a song, go, I need one more song, yeah, I'll throw this one in there. That's not good enough. You know, it has to be scrutinized just as someone would scrutinize it internationally, you know?
That's an excellent point. Spotify really has become a huge controller of our market now.
Yeah, which is disappointing. But, you know, I mean, I've been told it's a great place to be discovered and to grow and stuff. And I've seen that there are people streaming my songs from places where they wouldn't have access to it otherwise. So it's good for that. As far as the way it's monetized, I think that needs to be changed. You know, I don't think there's enough money going back into their royalties in a sense. You know, like the artists aren't getting paid as much as they should be. I think here, if I were to get 1 million streams I get paid about between $5,000 and $6,000, which for you guys is about two and a half, $3,000 for 1 million streams. But it can cost a lot of money in promo to get 1 million streams on a song, and you don't make that back. So I feel like the model, the streaming model, is broken at the moment. I mean, it works well if you're on the receiving end, but if you're on the supplying end, supplying the music to these streaming sites, the model's broken completely. So I think until that changes, we're going to see more and more artists quit and move into day jobs. You're going to see more and more labels shut down and turn into a marketing agency, or just liquidate altogether. So I think there's a lot of changes ahead, but I think once we come out the other side of this, maybe in a decade, it's going to look a lot better for artists globally.
You're absolutely right. And I know that people like ASCAP and BMI and the performing rights organizations are still trying to help shape what this all is, how it's all going to work between Spotify and then internet plays and all that. It's so open. It's interesting. You can post a video on YouTube and have it shut down as soon as the video is done uploading. You'll get the copyright violation notice. But I could put this same song on my podcast, on the regular podcast channels, and no one will flag it. Yeah, it's a strange world. I love Spotify. Like, I love it personally. I use it every day. I think Spotify is an incredible app. But the more I use it, the more I realize that that we're not getting paid enough. You know, when I listen to a song by someone, they're not getting paid. Even 1 cent per stream. That would be a great step in the right direction. 1 cent per stream. That'd be huge.
Because at the moment it's 0.063 or something. Like it's well below a cent. 1 cent's not much to ask.
I couldn't afford to get one individual haircut for what I get for a play on Spotify. What I find interesting is that I get Shazammed a lot, and Spotify picks those up, but I'll get Shazammed in Bulgaria. And I'm thinking, where am I? What speaker system is playing me in Bulgaria where somebody would have the ability to Shazam me in the first place?
I know, it's weird. When I see data reports like that and it says, you know, you've been Shazammed in Peru. And I'm like, dude, I couldn't even locate Peru right now off the top of my head. I know it's in South America, but I don't know whereabouts. And it's just that part of Spotify I love. I think it's fantastic. But yeah, I think once we all come together as an industry and start to stand up for our rights, you know, I think over the next 10 years we can change it to a positive payment system and copyright system, so that there's the wrong people are making the right money at the moment.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I do know that there are at least people working on that at this time, which kind of gives me a little bit of hope.
Totally.
Other than us
me too.
Sitting here and going, well, someday it's going to be different. No, there are people that are actually working on it. So that definitely shines a little light for me. But I do think if we could convert those people, though, from streaming a song and saying, wow, I really like that, to going and purchasing the album, or at least purchasing the song on iTunes or somewhere, I think that would be nice in the interim. But I don't see that happening a lot.
Yeah, I tend to use Spotify for sampling something. If an artist that I like has released a new product, I will sample the product there. And then if it hits me, I will go and purchase the vinyl, you know. And then I've got the product and I own those sounds and I can listen to them. And the cool thing about vinyl is you can smell your purchase.
Yes.
It has its own, the cardboard smells and a product has got to stimulate your senses, not just one of them, you know, but stimulate touch, smell, sight, hearing. I mean, I'm sure you could taste a vinyl if you really wanted to, but I'd probably avoid licking your records.
Well, yeah, there is that. But I remember very distinctly certain record companies, the plastic sleeve that they would put around the album cover had a certain smell, and you would have to be really careful how you slid it off so you didn't get static pops on your LP before you've even played it. There were some challenges there.
I remember those.
The album cover was the greatest thing. Like the album cover, the liner notes, if they put those in, because you can't read them on a CD now. It's so impossible.
Yeah, they're so small, man.
Yeah.
So small. CDs are pretty well, they're obsolete now. I mean,
yeah.
Not long ago, it was about 50-50 between download streams and physicals like CD units. And now it seems to have flipped, to 40-35% CDs. I mean, cars aren't really making cars anymore with CD players. So, I've been looking at there's a hole in the market there for a physical unit that has been modified. So I've been working with some people on such a product that should be still, a product that you would purchase, but it's delivered in such a way that it works with your car that has no CD player. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Almost like a flash drive model, something that you could just attach to really quickly and make it work. That was the great thing about CDs, was that you could just go to any song you wanted in any moment. You didn't have to fast forward to a cassette or wait for your 8-track to shift. That was a real appeal to them. But they sounded horrible when they first started, because they were just flat transfer.
They're not the greatest sound.
No.
Yeah.
At all.
And the skipping, what got me was the skipping, because where I grew up in Australia is very, the roads aren't very good. So, because there's only like 7 states in Australia, or 6 states and 1 territory, something like that. So they're massive areas of land to cover, and the budget for the roads is not overly great. Because we've got a population here less than LA, in the whole country. Everyone's spread out, and Australia is about the size of America, of North America. So the United States, pretty much you can fit Australia in it. So to drive from one side to the other is just as far, pretty much. So, but you've got 26 million people living here, spread out all over that.
And a lot of rural land that's...
Yeah. The further inland you drive, the worse the roads get. And I lived about 7 hours inland from the coast, from the east coast. So sort of probably around where Tennessee would be.
Okay.
In America.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of that far inland. But not as green. It's all very, very dry, quite barren in some parts, but the roads were terrible, and CDs would just skip and scratch all the time.
Oh, sure.
So I used to use cassettes as much as I could, because they wouldn't skip.
Yeah, exactly. And they had a better sound.
They do. They got a much warmer sound, don't they?
I think so. But speaking of sound,
I love them.
I love the recording that you got on this album, because it's minimal instrumentation, but it sounds so rich and full at the same time. Was that your strategy going in, or was that just like, hey, this sounds really good, let's maintain this level? The first song I recorded was actually the one that we put as track 1, is Chapel Street. And that song, I just sort of did it. I didn't think too much about it. I was just like, it needs a guitar, it needs a secondary guitar, and then a vocal, and we'll see what happens, And then after that, I started to challenge myself as to how full I could get a song with 4 tracks. So there's some songs in there where there's an acoustic guitar going, there's an electric guitar going, but the electric will also play harmony notes of itself on certain things. And in the vocal takes, I had 2 vocal takes through. I used the shaker whenever it came to the lead solo. I stood back from the mic and used the shaker on both of my vocal takes, so the harmony and the lead. So that adds this shaker effect that goes in the background. And it's kind of, just making do with different stuff. How you would have done it to make a full demo sound with, a Porter Studio back in the day. Yeah. And it came out so good. The sound is clean, but it just strikes me how rich and full it is. And interestingly, Chapel Street is actually my favorite song on the album.
Oh, sick.
Yeah. You also did a cover. You did If You Want My Love by Cheap Trick. What was the premise behind doing that one?
The melody of that song, like the original of that song, is just ridiculously good. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting too, like what that band did with a song like that. very interesting. And I wanted to take it to more of a chilled out level, more of a ballad, because it was a rock ballad. I wanted to sort of bring it back to a ballad. So that was my intention, was just to tone it down a bit. And there's some parts in there which are suitable for the rock ballad, but weren't, when I toned it down, they just didn't fit. So I had to adjust some things melodically with the song and with some of the chords just to get it to fit into that ballad environment. But for the most part, I mean, it sounds recognizably the Cheap Trick song. It's not too left of center.
No, but it blends in really well with the style of the album too. It's kind of that nice balance between identifying it with the original, but also having it fit within the confines of what you were doing here. I was pleasantly surprised by that, actually. It was very nice.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
So this is labeled as 4-Track Sessions Volume 1. So obviously you're looking at more. What's your focus going forward?
I've started working on another, on Volume 2. I'm starting to shortlist some songs, and I'll start workshopping those songs and making them better, as good as I can possibly make them, and then start the tracking process. And I'll probably, it'll be a similar vibe. It's going to be the acoustic style storyteller stuff. That's the next project. But we are looking at a full production album soon.
Oh, very good.
Which will be called, we're looking at calling that The Shelf. And it's a bunch of songs that I'd written or connected with in the time that I was put on the shelf by a major label here in Australia.
Ooh.
And we didn't see eye to eye. And so they put me up on the shelf and weren't really interested in letting me get out until we involved some heavyweights from New York to get us out. But I've got a bunch of songs there, and I want to put them all on one album, and have it more of a journey style album where it's a start to finish flow.
Okay.
Not just a compilation, where a bunch of songs that I've got and I put them on an album. So I want it to be a bit more of an old school album style, but I do have the sound for that. I've recorded some demos a couple of years ago, and there's this sound that I've had in my head for years. And I finally figured out what those elements were, and how to make them work together. So we're going to get cracking on that pretty soon.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Really looking forward to that.
I'm already looking forward to it.
Oh, it's going to be sick, man. It's got there'll be 80s sort of, going back to 80s drum machine tracks and stuff like that.
Okay.
In with acoustic sort of music. It's gonna be sick.
That sounds like a very fun project. Very fun. I'm looking forward to it already.
I'm looking forward to working on that.
Oh yeah. We have the Lost 80s live tour, which is a bunch of bands from the 80s, whoever signs up for the tours that year. Throughout the year, they typically do 3 or 4 bands will go on a short tour here and there. And then they all come together here in Las Vegas in September and do the big show with everybody, Flock of Seagulls usually headlines because they're the Grammy award-winning band. But, we've had Missing Persons and all kinds of bands show up. So I'm a huge fan of that era of music. So I'll be curious to see what this sounds like.
Sick.
Are you planning on doing any live performances, like any Facebook streaming or anything?
Yeah, we're gonna start doing some more of it. We've done one live stream so far. So when lockdown started to happen around the globe, I just noticed a lot of artists that I follow seem to be inundating their followers with content, giving them too much. Like every day they were doing a stream. It's like, dude, no one wants to hear you that much. Like, don't make your followers sick of what you do. So I didn't do one. I didn't do a streamed thing until earlier this month, I think. And we launched the 4-Track Sessions on a Facebook stream from a production warehouse, which a friend of mine, he's got this warehouse. I said, man, could we, instead of doing it in my lounge room or in a rehearsal room or somewhere like that, could we maybe do it at your warehouse? Because all of his, all of his production equipment, trusses and lighting and road cases and all that were all in there at the time. So he set up this really sick little stage and great lighting and had a forklift in the background and all these racking and stuff like that. So it's a really cool vibe. That was the first one we'd done. It's a weird thing to do when you finish a song and there's no noise, there's no crowd noise, whether it be applause or even just chattering or breathing. There's just dead silence. It's a bizarre feeling.
Right. The only way you know anybody's even there is just because the comments are streaming up your screen that you can't read. But that has to be. Like, I think about for musicians that are doing that. I think about athletes, hockey, baseball, all that are playing to no crowd stadiums. That's got to have some kind of impact psychologically on you. That no, you don't have that vibe coming up.
Well, you seem to lack the adrenaline. Yeah. Adrenaline is a great drug that sort of seems to kick in when you've got an audience. And I mean, I had a bit of adrenaline happening that night because I was nervous about the stream, because I hadn't done the stream before. But if you're an athlete and you're running out into an empty stadium, empty stadiums they're cool, but they don't. It's not that same vibe. It would have been very hard, I think, the lack of adrenaline they'd have running out to an empty stadium.
Yeah, it feels more like a practice.
Yeah, totally. It'd be super weird.
I think so too. Well, I definitely am a fan of yours. I'm so glad I got to connect with you and talk to you about this. I look forward to some more. And this new album that you're going to work on sounds really, really intriguing. So I'm curious to see what you do with it.
Thanks, man. Thanks, bro. We'll be sure to let you know.
Oh, definitely, and come back and see us again. Well, hear us, listen to, talk to me.
Once the world opens up too, I'll give you a shout, because there's a guy in Vegas who I need to come over and meet. He's offered me one of his spare cars to drive around Arizona and have a look around.
Oh,
so when I can finally do that, I'll look you up.
Oh, definitely do. And we'll stay in touch. But in the meantime, keep making this wonderful music. And thank you for this album. It's really enjoyable.
Thanks, man. Thank you very much.
You bet. You take care, my friend.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
What an enjoyable guy. I mean, not only is his music enjoyable, but he's just like a great guy to talk to. Has his finger on the pulse, has a great focus on what he's doing. He's very inspired. You can feel that in what he's saying. And I just love talking to people like that. It makes it very easy for me to do my job. But it's also great for me as a fan of music to find other creators that are just, they're not just pushing a button and saying, all right, let's do the formula again. Here's how you write a song. He's actually putting thought into his songs. He's doing what I'm doing with some of my older songs and kind of revamping them for modern times and modern sounds. So I definitely respect that. Check out his music. Thank you guys for checking out this episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. Please remember to leave a rating on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you're listening to the show. Subscribe. If you have any questions or suggestions, send me an email at scott@scotthaskin.com. Thank you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Cheers.